This is Andy Tube. In this video, I'm going to explain the Bobbin Winder system on a Singer Model 237. This is Stella, if you see some of my other videos. Now, the whole Bobbin Winder system on this is a simple system, and you'll see it on a lot of fashion mates. The whole system has 16 parts. And I'm going to be able to show you like 15 of them, but one I can't get to anymore because they use a rivet and not a screw. But the idea of the Bobbin Winder system is the thread comes from your spool. It's up here on the spool pin, just like when you would thread the needle. But what you have to do, you bring it under this Bobbin Winder thread tension disc. And see if I can, maybe I can get in here a little bit closer. What you see right here, that big silver round piece, is not the disc. That's the rivet. And under that rivet is a spring, and the spring and rivet sit in the actual tension disc of the Bobbin Winder thread tension disc. And that is riveted now to a little piece of metal back here called the tension bracket. And the tension bracket is held in place by a mounting screw right through the front. So when you bring this around, you have to go under the disc and on top of the bracket. You see, well, I don't know if you do see that. There is a spring in there, and you should be able to lift the disc up about a 32nd of an inch off the bracket. If you don't have that springy motion, it could be dirt. You could try washing it or blowing it out with air. It could be a broken spring, which then you're going to have to replace the whole unit. But if you go under the disc and on top of the bracket, that spring pushes down on the rivet and puts tension on this side of the thread on its way to the bobbin. And you want tension on the Bobbin Winder thread because you need to wind a evenly wound bobbin. You don't want it loose and tight and uneven, so that when you go to sew, it feeds off very evenly, and you don't have bird's nests, and you don't have skip stitches and things like that. So you would put your bobbin on this piece right here that's called the position pin, because that's where you position the bobbin. And then you would take your thread in between the sides of the bobbin and out the top, and that part would be all threaded and ready to go. Okay, then what you see here is the fingertip control of the bobbin winder lever, not bracket. I almost said bracket. Bobbin winder lever. And it's moved to push the pin and spindle and friction ring over against the hand wheel when you want to wind a bobbin. And then the lever's used to push it back. So you're seeing the fingertip control, it's called, of that lever. And lastly, back here, what you can see from the top is this stop latch. And the stop latch is made so if you want to automatically stop the winding process, you can position this lever inside of the bobbin to whatever depth you want to fill the bobbin, and then tighten it. And then when the thread fills to that point, it'll keep winding, but because it's on a swivel screw here, it'll start pushing that lever away until it eventually does not contact the hand wheel anymore, and the position pin will stop turning. Now this isn't functioning right. It won't fit inside the bobbin, and it shouldn't be all floppy around here. If you don't want to use the stop latch, you just tighten it back out of the way, and you manually fill the bobbin to the level that you want. But if you wanted to use a automatic fill stop, you would position it inside the bobbin and tighten it. It's not working properly, and I'll explain why. So that's the parts that you're seeing outside this, on the top of the arm cover up here. So what I want to do now is I'm going to take off that arm cover, because some of the parts are fastened to the arm cover and some are underneath. In this model, if you saw other videos of it, you have one arm cover screw here on the nose end, and you have two, one in each corner back here, and you remove those 3 screws, which I've already done, and you can lift up the arm cover. Okay, so for now I'm going to make a little room here, because I want to put this arm cover on the work surface. And matter of fact, I'm going to lower my tripod so we can get a better look at it, and I'll show you all the parts that are attached to it. Okay, so if you remember, I talked about this thread tension bracket. Now you can see kind of underneath there, and see it used to kind of be it would screw into the bracket. Now that's a rivet. That big silver disc is a big rivet that goes right through, and you can't remove the disc from the bracket anymore on this model, and you can't expose the spring inside. Okay, but you can adjust it, which I'll show you how to do later, and you can remove it from the arm cover by turning the adjustment screw left all the way. You can back it out of a little retaining nut right here that holds it together. You see the bottom of the bracket right there. So let's just go in here and loosen that screw. And let me make a little room here, because the nut may fall out of the bottom. Yep, there it goes. Okay, so there's the little rectangle shape fastening nut that screw tightens into, and then I can push the screw out, and it will come out the front of the arm cover. It's the typical chrome plated Singer screw, and then the bracket just sits down in this space here, and you can just pull it right out. That's how the bracket looks. And you see that big oblong hole there? That's so that you can adjust the bracket up and down. And here's the inside of it. I'll show you that bracket comes through the top, sticks on through past the nut that you put right there. So there's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, here's 6 pieces of the 16 right there. And they all have their own part number, even the bracket and the disc and the rivet and the spring, even though you can't get these apart anymore. Okay, then the other part that's fastened to the arm cover is the bobbin winder stop, and it's the same kind of thing. It's got a screw that goes through the arm cover and goes into a retaining nut, another rectangular retaining nut that's in a little pocket molded in underneath. So to take it off, you just back that screw out of the nut, and there's supposed to be a little lock washer here, and the latch itself, and the nut. So you have the screw, the stop washer, the stop latch, and the nut. Four more pieces. Let's see if that'll pull out now. Oop, there came the nut. Okay, very similar to the other one. I'll put that to the side over there. Then I can pull out the other 3 pieces. Here's the little lock washer, and maybe you can tell it's got like little jagged teeth on it. That's the lock part of the washer. Uh-oh. Well, I hope that didn't roll off the back. It rolled under the machine. And then here's the mounting screw for the latch. Looks a lot like the other mounting screw, and there's the latch itself. Stop latch. Okay. So, now you have all the bobbin winder pieces out of the arm cover. When I put them back in, I'll explain the proper way and how they are to be assembled and how to adjust them and so forth. Okay, now I'm going to reposition the tripod again so that we can look down at the top of the open arm and see the rest of the bobbin winder system. And I got to find that little screw, that little lock washer. Oh boy. Okay, this gives us a view of the top of the open horizontal arm here now, and a better view and access to work on the bobbin winder lever. And I did find my little lock washer, and I put all those parts where I should have put them to begin with in my little magnetic tray, so that they don't wander off on me like that. Now, I'm just going to turn this a little bit to get this under here. Before, I showed you the top of this position pin that the the bobbin actually sits on. And the lever itself is held on by a hinge screw and a spacing washer. So let's take that out, and I'll show you that. I need a bigger, sturdier screw bit for that. So let me get my Chapman driver out here, and we'll loosen that. Lefty loosen. There we go. Take that out, and there's supposed to be a spacing washer here, and there is. So there is the hinge screw, and you remember it's a hinge screw, right? Because you see how the threads don't go all the way up to the head? There's a big smooth piece under the head, and that's so that this bracket can fit on that smooth hinge part, and the bracket can hinge back and forth. So the screw screws in all the way and deadheads down into the body. The body's threaded here, but that space is to allow the hinging effect. So we have our nice sturdy hinge screw, and it did have a spacing washer, and the spacing washer is cupped a little bit. It's not perfectly flat. It's got a little dish in it, like a little saucer. It's hard to see, but if you work on your machine like this, you'll see it right away that it's dished. And there's a reason for that, and I'll explain that. And then what you got left here is the parts of the bracket. And this is the position pin, and it goes through the bushing on the bracket, and on this end of it is a bobbin winder pulley. And I think these are all pressed together at the factory. There is no set screw. There's no way to disassemble. Now I don't know if you forced it off, maybe it would come off, but I don't know that it's made to do that. To me, it's more like it's all pressed together and not made to come off. So I'm not going to try. But there's the pin and spindle, which are all like one piece of metal. The spindle is more narrower. You see that silver piece there? That's the diameter of the spindle. It comes through the pulley, and it's all held on the lever. Now on this pulley is supposed to be the friction ring, so that when you hinge it over, the friction ring rubs right on the, oops, can you see this is the back of the hand wheel right here. So when your hand wheel is turning, it's supposed to turn the friction ring down on the pulley, which will turn the position pin. Now the friction ring is more commonly known nowadays as the rubber tire. Ta-da! And it's 322. This, I think that's the part number 322, and it's called rubber tire. It's called friction tire. It's called the friction rubber, and friction ring is what Singer called it. And it can just be slipped on and off of the pulley. Right, so we're going to put a new one on here that I bought at So Classic, and all I do is just start one edge of it kind of down into the groove of the pulley, and then push the other side of it up over the top of the pulley. And when the bobbin tire's new, it's kind of flexible, so it'll go over. Once it's on there, it sure doesn't want to come off. I mean, you can peel it off like that, see? But putting it back on, you just have to kind of get it started into that pulley. And oops, maybe my thumbs are stronger than my fingertips, so I'll try it this way. Get it started into the pulley and then push it over the top of the pulley and down around the edges. Come on, you. And they do make different size of friction rings. Even I think if you got the wrong size, you'd be okay here, because you have a lot of space that this hinges in. See, this is all the way away, and then this is against, so there's a little bit of room there, you know, more than 1/8 of an inch. So hey, there we go. So that's how you remove and replace the friction ring or rubber tire. Just peel it off and push it down back on over the edge of the pulley. There we go. Now, really the only maintenance that this needs is occasional, and not very often at that, Get my bottle of Tri-Flow oil here. Occasionally, because it's a spindle down through this bushing, it can get dirty and stiff in there. So occasionally you're going to want to drop a drop of oil down in there, and you can do this from the top with the arm cover on, because the positioning pin and the top of that stick out. Just go right next to the positioning pin and the spindle where it's going into the bigger bushing, and just put a drop in there and give it a spin, and that should do you for many months. And I suggest that after you do that, that you wipe off any excess, because you don't want oil down here on the tire, because if you get oil on the tire, it's not going to turn well against the hand wheel. It'll just slip around. So that's why I said just one little drop in there, spin it around to spread it, and then wipe up any excess that's still on the outside. Then you'll be okay. Alright, so let me grab my screwdriver here and we'll reassemble this and test it. Now that we have a new rubber tire, our friction ring, it should work really well. But let me find my stuff and we'll get it back together. During this reassembly, I'm going to show you the 3 most common mistakes people make when they're working or assembling the Bobbin Winder system. So we have our lever, right, and our new tire, and we're going to screw it right in here with the hinge screw. And the first mistake that people make is that they put this washer on the machine first, and then they put the lever, and then they put in the hinge screw and tighten it up. And what that does is it raises the whole bobbin winder lever by this very small amount. But when they raise it even by the width of this washer, it moves the position pin up too high, and when you put the bobbin on there, the stop latch will not go inside. So I think that they think that there has to be something between the lever and the body of the machine, but that's not true. This chrome lever just will sit right over that hole, and then this cupped washer will go onto the hinge screw with the high part of the washer up under the head of the screw. So the washer is kind of cupped facing down. And what that cup does, it acts like a tension, not a lock, but it acts as a tension washer, so that when you tighten the screw in all the way, it's going to swivel, but that washer will flatten out against the lever and the screw and provide some tension, so that the bobbin winder lever is not just swinging back and forth. It has tension. It's going to take your fingertips moving the lever, or it's going to take the bobbin thread pushing against the stop latch to move it away. Okay, so the lever goes first, then the washer with the cup side up, and then the hinge, the screw, and it tightens all the way. Righty tighty. Okay, so it takes some effort to move this back and forth. It's not just flopping around. If it didn't have that pressure or tension washer, you know, when the hand wheel was spinning against the tire, it could just spin it right away from it. So let me unlock the stop motion screw by holding the hand wheel and turning that to the left or counterclockwise. So now the hand wheel can be turned by the motor, but no needle or feed activity. Let me just test my motor, make sure I got everything plugged in. Yep. If I push that over, then my wheel and my position pin are turning. Let's see if I can put something on there. Here we go. If I put a little piece of tape on that position pin where the bobbin would go, we should see that flying around. Yeah. Then when you move it left away, it doesn't move. So our new bobbin is good size and works well against the back of the hand wheel. Okay. Let's see if I can take that off. And we're done with the parts that fasten into the top of the open arm here. So let's take a look at these parts that go back into the arm cover. Okay, let's see if I can move this. If I can get down here and get a little bit closer for you. So if I need to rest it there. So what's going to go up here is the stop latch, right? And this is the second place that people make mistakes. And that is that they put the stop or lock washer against the arm cover like that. And then they put the stop latch over it. Can we see that? I'm going to zoom in a little bit maybe. And then they put the stop latch, and then they put the screw through the latch and the nut in the back. Now we've got the same problem that we had with the bobbin winder lever. That is why this thing was flopping around in the breeze before, and it also raises the latch up too high to go inside the bobbin if you choose to use that feature. It's very very precise fit in there for that to go in there. And so just like on the bobbin winder lever, the latch is going to go on the arm cover first. Okay, and then you can just put that lock washer onto the screw, and you can put that through the stop latch hole, and that's how it should be. So from the top you have the screw, the lock washer, then the latch. And then that all goes into the mounting hole. And then we'll take our retaining nut and we'll slip it into the little recessed area. Okay. And let me hold that with my finger while I turn that around here. And then we'll tighten that up. Now when you tighten this stop latch firmly, it's going to stay there. It's not going to be swinging around in the breeze. And if you choose to tuck it inside the inside the bobbin to use the automatic stop feature, yep, okay, there we go. So I'm just going to move this out of the way for now and snug that up. But you see, now it will stay. It's going to take more force once we tighten it because we've got the lock washer in the proper place. Now for the thread tension bracket and the tension disc, this is where a third error can be made. But first, let me get it mounted, since I seem to have trouble getting the screws start on here. So you see it, it's kind of an upside down L bracket. So you're going to turn that end of the L towards you, kind of stick out over the edge here. And then there's no washer on this anywhere. There is just the mounting and adjustment screw that goes in that big oval slot. And then down in here, it's got to come through that hole down there. It's got to go through the slot, and it's got to go through that hole so we can get it into the nut. So let's see if I can do that. Yep. Yep. And come like that. Since the screw will go right through this hole is bigger than the head of the screw because you got to get your screwdriver in there to adjust it. Let's see if I can. Oh, that looks a little bit better. Let's see, while I've got it there, if I can push that on through the hole like that. Okay, now that's sticking out a little bit, so I think I can get that retaining nut in there. Let me turn this around. I can hold that nut gently in. Whoop, almost, huh? What I want to do is hold that nut in place there. Some people would just put a little piece of tape on it, you know, and stick it up against the plastic. Let the tape hold it in place and just screw the screw right through the tape into the nut. But I think that I've got it in here now. If I can get the screw to go into the nut, which I can tell by my fingertip it is. Hey. Okay. So now let me let's get this back up on the arm. Let's see how do I raise this up, and then I can show you the third mistake there and why that tension bracket is so long with that big oblong hole in it. So we would put this back up here now. Okay, and then we've got our three, ta-da, we have our three mounting screws. We want to secure the cover now, because any of the adjustments you can just do to that tension bracket from right through the front of the arm cover. So, get these going back down in here. We put one up on the front over here. And get that started. So the reason that bracket has that elongated hole is so that the bracket can be adjusted up and down so that the bobbin thread goes on the bobbin evenly. So I know some of you are following me right now what I'm talking about. But some that haven't worked on it before or experienced that is the higher this is elevated up, adjusted up, the higher on the bobbin the thread is going to wind. And I've got it all the way up. So if I put thread on here and wound it, all the thread would be winding up on the high side, up on the top side of this. Then if I loosen the screw and, whoops, I need my little skinny cabinet screwdriver. If I loosen that screw and I lowered, come on you, and I lowered this bracket all the way to the bottom, when I wound the bobbin, all the thread would pile up on the bottom half. And we don't want that, right? We always want the bobbin to wind back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, just like a fishing reel or just like a spool of thread. How nice and neat that is. We want our bobbin to wind that way. So usually this bracket is going to be about halfway up. If that is, let's lower this down here. You see that? See? If I bring it up all the way, it's going to be too tall. If I put it all the way to the bottom, it'll be too low. So someplace in that middle area. Now it may not be exactly the middle. You know, every machine is a little bit different. How this bracket works and how the position pin and the spindle and everything are set into the machine, it can be a little bit different. So that's why they made it adjustable, right? This isn't metal, this is plastic, and it can warp, and it's molded, and it can be a low spot or a high spot. So that's why they make it adjustable. So can I get some light on the front here? So I'm going to get my screwdriver back in the screw. It's kind of in the shadow there and hard to see. And then I'm going to try and find a sweet spot in about the middle to start with, right? That's where I want to, well, actually right now I just want to get the screw to tighten in there. Yeah, not my favorite. Is that it? Okay, oop, yeah. So that's up, that's down. I'll come up about halfway and tighten it up. Okay. Then all we can do to test that, there's no fancy way, you know, is we just have to put some thread on here and thread it and wind the bobbin, start winding it, and see how does the thread go onto the bobbin. How does it wind? Does it look good? So let me get some thread and we'll try it out. Okay, let's start with this view. Where I left off, we were going to wind a bobbin on the 237 to see how our height adjustment was here on the tension bracket to make sure that it would wind the bobbin properly. And while I'm talking about that, let me show you a let me get some more light here, maybe. See if we can show you a bobbin that was wound without tension or without proper tension. You see how uneven it is, and you see by my thumb how it wound the thread higher or thicker than on the left by my finger. So that means if they were using the tension bracket or disc on whatever their machine is, it was not adjusted properly, because the thread's higher on one side than the other. And the fact that it looks kind of like a rat's nest here is, my guess is this one had no tension. So maybe what they did was come off of the thread spool right to the bobbin, or they went up to a thread guide and back to the bobbin, or they went around this but not under the tension disc and above the bracket. So if you try and sew with this, you can imagine you're going to have a problem. So that's what we want to avoid, is both of these. You want to always wind with tension, and you want to have your whatever's providing the tension, or whatever system you have that puts the bobbin at the right height to the tension, so it will wind nice and even. Let me see if I have something wound here that's nice and even that I can grab real quick. Well, there's not much thread left on this, but if you look in there, you see the height is even all the way across. It's nice, it's wound firmly, not over tight, and it's not loose, and it has been wound evenly, so during sewing it unwound evenly, and that's exactly what we're looking for when we wind a bobbin. Okay, so let me start with this class 15 bobbin. Now if you went online and you said I want to buy bobbins for a model 237, it should pop up and sell you bobbins, you know, that would be class 15. So I had mentioned class 66 earlier, but that's mostly what I do, is machines with class 66. And this is one of the very few machines I do that is a class 15. So what I had done is just stopped by Walmart and I bought a package of 3 class 15 bobbins. And they were in a Singer package. They were Singer branded class 15. And they have the little rectangle notch in there to match up with the little rectangular pin on the positioning pin, so it'll catch the bobbin and spin it. But what I found was this stop latch won't fit between the two sides of the bobbin. Let's see if I can get a little closer on that. Because I was going to fool around and adjust the latch a little bit, and I thought, what is wrong? Somebody's got the wrong latch on this machine. But it won't, the latch won't slip inside there. So I thought, well, how can it automatically stop the winding if it can't get inside? So I dug out the package with the other two in it, and I said, wait, these say Singer Class 15. Then I remembered years ago I had bought some Class 15 bobbins. So I went and dug around in my dresser drawer that I keep extra stuff in, and I found a package of 4 Class 15 bobbins. They were not marked Singer, they were like Universal Class 15 bobbins, and they have the little square, see if I quit moving, maybe will it focus here? They have the little square notch. Maybe if I got more light. Hold up my little lamp here. They have the square notch in there, like the Class 15, or the rectangle notch, and they've got 10 holes on each side so that you can look through and see how much thread you have left, and they're metal. So I put that on, and it latches on perfectly, the little pin to the hole, and this, whoops, wow, I really tightened that up. Let me loosen that a little bit. This, now the latch, the stop latch, can go right in between it, just like it's made to. So I could, if I wanted to, pick a spot on the curve of the latch and move it in that far and say that's how full I want the bobbins to be, real full, and I could set my stop latch and I could tighten it up there, and then when the thread built up, and it would hit the latch, and it would keep filling and filling and filling, and slowly move the position pin and rubber tire away from the hand wheel. So that's the automatic stop latch. And on this 1970 machine, it doesn't take what I'm going to call modern Class 15 bobbins. You need what I'm calling, and I don't know what Singer calls them, but I'm going to call it a modern vintage Class 15. And the reason I say modern vintage is because what I will call vintage only has the notch and one little hole by the cylinder to bring the thread out, and they're solid metal. So they have the little hole for the rectangle pin, and they have one small hole to bring the thread out, you know, when you stick it on to start winding. But otherwise, both sides are solid metal. So I would call those vintage. This Class 15 that's full size, I would call modern vintage, because it is full size. And the one that is Class 15 and probably fits on all their newer Class 15 sewing machines, that's not quite as tall, I'm going to call modern. Okay? Now, while I'm on the subject of all that, let me back out a little bit here. Put my lamp down because I'm getting tired of holding it. And I want to show you the same kind of a thing in a Class 66. So this would be like for a lot of machines that I've done, like a model 337, 338, 347, 348, 401A, 403A, 404, the 500A Rocketeer Slant-O-Matic, the 503 Rocketeer Slant-O-Matic, and probably many more, including the Model 66, which was when the Class 66 bobbin was created. And that came after the Model 15, which is when the Class 15 bobbin was created. So when they went to the Model 66, They had a different bobbin that's curved like a little spaceship. The sides are curved. It holds a little tiny bit less, like 5 or so yards less of thread. And this is a vintage class 66. Again, that's going to be my terminology. It's all solid. You can't tell how much thread is on there. There's one little hole. So when you put this on the bobbin spindle, you can bring the thread up from the inside and out and hold on to it while you start winding the bobbin. And you see it's a heavy, kind of like stainless steel. That is an old vintage class 66. And then they'll have what I call a vintage class 66, where you see it's made a little bit different, where the barrel is pressed into between the two sides and curled over. And on these are better quality because the little barrel does not stick up past the side. So it won't hang up your thread as the thread crosses over it. These are good quality vintage class 66. Okay, and the difference between class 15s are flat. Class 15s are always flat, and class 66 always have this little curved dish, saucer shape. Okay, so we had vintage 66, vintage 66, and we have modern vintage 66, where it still has the little hole to put the thread in when you're going to wind the bobbin, but they put 3 big holes so that you could see in there and see how much thread you had left without pulling the bobbin out of the machine and looking, wow, I'm almost out of thread. You can look right through the holes and say, wow, I'm almost out of thread. Okay, so modern vintage. And then you have what I will call the modern class 66. It's clear see-through plastic. It still has a little hole on each side by the barrel for you to bring the thread in and stick it out and hold on to it when you start winding. Okay, so there's a little trivia for you. And by the way, you see how nice and compact and even that thread is wound on there? What did I do with that rat's nest one? This was wound with a good tension and good adjustment, and this one was not. So you can hopefully see the difference here. You want to avoid this, and you want to aim for that. Okay, so let me get all these class 66 bobbins out of here. And let me get my modern class 15 out of here because my latch won't work. If you could use this in the machine, but you can't use it with the latch. But you could put it, you could put this modern class 15 on here and wind it, and you could put it down in the bobbin case. Get the bobbin case, and put it in the bobbin case and put that into the race and hold it and sew on it just fine. You just would not be able to use the stop latch, which, like, my wife never uses that anyway. So, but if you have a model 237 and you want to use that stop latch, you need a modern vintage that's the full height. Okay, well, that's a lot of talk about bobbins. So let's go ahead and thread this to wind the bobbin. Come off my spool pin, and I'm going to stick it under the tension disc and just above the bracket. So I have my tension, and then Singer says that you put this on the position pin and thread it, but I always thread it before I put it on the position pin just because it seems easier for me. But of course you put the two you put the thread between the two sides, and in this case there's no little tiny hole by the barrel, so you just come out any hole. Okay, see, I can hardly thread this like this. Imagine if I had it on the machine. Of course I probably could have put my glasses on. Okay, I finally made it out. So I'll pull a few inches and hold on to that. Now I'll stick it over here on the position pin, right? Just leave it there for a second, because I'm going to go over and I'm going to loosen the stop motion screw. Hold the hand wheel, left hand, grab the stop motion screw, right hand, turn it towards me till it stops. Now I've disengaged the needle bar, and I have disengaged the feed, and now I'm going to just hold onto this. Let me turn it so it gets in that latch. So it gets in the little, nope, where is it? I'm doing it by feel here. Where's my little pin? Oh, here's the pin right there facing me. That's why I didn't see it. It's kind of in the shadow. So let me get the little square notch on the little square pin there. Now I will use the lever and push that over, so inside now that rubber friction ring or rubber tire is rubbing on the back side of the hand wheel. I'm going to hold my thread here a little bit so it doesn't pull out, and I'm going to just wind a little bit to get it started. Okay, now I can break off the thread or I can cut the thread. Now when you wind the bobbin, you want a steady, even speed that is not full speed. That's what they recommend. So nice and even at a moderate speed. Let's see how it does. And what we want to see is the thread from the spool going up and down the barrel of that bobbin, and that means it's going to be an even wind. If you see it only going halfway and up or halfway and down, then we need to adjust our height of this. So let's run it a little bit here and we'll take a look. I was hoping by putting this at the middle height that it would be just right. Okay, let's just take a look at that. And pull that off, and let's see how we did. Let's see if I back out a little bit here and get some light back up here. So it looks pretty even. The height on both sides looks the same, and you see how it's nice and smooth back and forth. It's wound back and forth, nice and smooth. So I'm gonna call that done. Now, what would you do if you looked at the bobbin, and we'll call this the top, and if the top had wound a lot more than the bottom, that would mean that your tension bracket here was up a little bit too high. So you would just go right in from the front, and you would loosen the mounting screw, and then you would lower it down a tiny amount and wind a little more and see if that was winding up and down evenly now. If when you're winding your bobbin, if the thread winds mostly on the bottom, then you just do the opposite. You just come over and loosen that mounting screw, and you raise the tension bracket up a little bit. The height of that bracket determines how evenly that spool or bobbin will wind. And that's it. That's why this is adjustable. So I hope that's making sense, and then that's how that you adjust these. You want to be sure on your machine that you always have a little tension, some spring in there, and when you wind the thread through there, make sure that you get between the tension disc and the bracket, and you can feel when you pull on it, you'll feel the drag. If you miss it and you get underneath here, you're going to have a little tiny bit of tension, but not enough, and you're going to end up with a bobbin that's wound very erratically and poorly, like that. Ta-da! Okay, and the last thing I'll tell you is buy more bobbins. I can't tell you how many times I've fixed a problem just by looking at how they have wound their bobbin, and I'll look through the side, and it's what I call rainbow threading. I'll see a layer of red thread, and then blue thread, and yellow, and black, and white, where they didn't have any more bobbins and they needed a different color thread, so they just wound the new thread on top of the old thread. And that usually leads to a problem. Not always, but look, you know, bobbins are less than $1. So Singer used to issue their new machines with 3 bobbins, but you know, buy yourself 3 or 5 or 10 extra bobbins. It's a small amount, and put your different colored threads on there for your projects, and then when you need a red thread, you'll have it. When you need a blue thread or whatever, you're not going to have to wind on top of your other threads. And the one I took off the other day, I kept this to show you. Here's what I pulled off. There's a case of rainbow threading right there. I have black, blue, red, and white, all wound on the same bobbin. And the bobbin was only about half full. So really, just keep a handful of extra bobbins. It's a nice investment. So that is the Bobbin Winder System on the Model 237. With some instructions on how to get a nice evenly wound bobbin, and a little bit of trivia history on vintage, modern vintage, and modern bobbins. Class 15 for this with the flat side. Okay, just like that, flat side. And if you find the plastic ones fit your machine, that's great. And I buy most of my bobbins on eBay. And I look for reputable sellers and who's offering a good deal. And I usually buy, 20 or 30 at a time. Thanks for tuning in to the latest video for Stella. And I hope you'll come back and visit me when you have time. Take care.